Hello, loves, and welcome to the Psychic Sages, your podcast for all things psychic development, spirituality, and Reiki. My name is Linda, and I'm joined today again by my lovely and wonderful co host, Megan.
Hey.
And our topic today is intuition. We're going to start this off by talking about my journey with my intuition. And then next episode, Megan is going to follow up with an episode about her intuition. So get yourself a cozy beverage and strap in for our journey today.
So, Linda, today all eyes are on you. We get to hear all about your intuition. I wanted to share something first. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So, for everyone watching and listening to us, it's important to say that this journey of the podcast started because I had this really strong knowing that I should do a podcast. And I wasn't so comfortable with that for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I was feeling really uncomfortable about it, but I knew that I was being not just nudged, but told that I need to do a podcast. So I jumped forward with the idea. And I think anyone in that position immediately asks themselves, what the fuck am I going to talk about? So the first thing that I felt I was hearing at the time was, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? How do I know that I'm taking the right next step? How do you know that? How do we figure that out? And I thought, intuition, I'm going to start with intuition. And not so long after that, I knew I wasn't supposed to do this podcast alone. And I knew the person that I was supposed to be doing this with in full partnership was the amazing, incredible Linda. And I love that I'm not just interviewing you as a guest on my podcast. I am so grateful that I'm doing this together with you. And my intuition showed me that I should ask. I was so terrified to ask you because I'm always afraid that someone is going to reject me or that I'm going to fail. But I did. I said, you know what? How would you feel about doing this podcast with me? Do you remember what you said?
I said I was thinking about the same thing. I'm getting emotional already. We're not even in the episode. We're not even in the story, and I'm already getting teary-eyed. Yeah, I was also scared to ask you. I thought so. I thought I was going to be a co-host maybe sometimes, and I said to you, yeah, anytime you need someone, hit me up. I'm there with you. And then I realized because I wanted to do a podcast as well, I really liked the idea, but I didn't want to do the whole workload by myself. It was too much. I mean, I have a healing business. I have my own channel on YouTube as well, and it was just too much. So that was really funny. We were both scared, and then we kind of, we made it work.
Yeah. I didn't
Yeah.
realize I was going to share that story, but it feels very important because it was
Yeah.
the only episode I started preparing myself for. And then shortly after that, I knew I needed to do this together with you. And I just have to speak to Linda's generosity of spirit and say that they are truly one of the most generous souls I've ever met. From the moment I said I wanted to do a podcast, they were so supportive and exactly that. I thought it was a kindness and a tremendous honor that you offered to step in and assist me with anything and to be on whatever show I would do. And then, yeah, to have you say, yes, I'll do this thing with you. Anyway, my intuition really brought me to that. And with that, I'll open up the topic of your intuition.
Yeah.
Amazing, remarkable Linda. We talked through some questions. We're going to start with something very specific about you and
Mhm.
your journey with your intuition. This is really important. And I think a lot of people listening and watching out there, this is going to resonate. So, tell us about your journey, Linda, because you lost touch with your intuition. So, tell us about the point where you lost touch with your intuition. And then, how did you come back? How did you rediscover that again?
Yeah, I think this is important. By the way, I'm getting chills when you read the questions, I started to get chills, so we need to talk about it.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
so in our introduction episode, I started to speak a little bit about having psychic dreams already when I was a child and getting visited by spirits, even though I don't like I know it happened, but I don't have a lot of memories about it. Um, and I should maybe put a trigger warning right here at the beginning of speaking a little bit about abuse. So if you're not up for that, we will in our editing, we will leave a timestamp either in the description box down below or in the description of the podcast episode for you. If you're not in the mindset for that, just skip ahead. That's fine. But I wanted to talk about that because I grew up in a severely abusive household. We're talking severe emotional abuse, severe mental and psychological abuse. Basically, what happened was that from actually as long as I remember, I was taught that my emotions and my experiences were invalid and I was experiencing things wrong. And we need to start at this point because intuition comes in as a subtle sensation. It comes in as a subtle sense of hearing, a subtle sense of feeling, a subtle sense of knowing. Even the clairaudience is a subtle hearing inside of my head. And in order to fully tap into this, you need to trust your own perceptions. And very early on, when I was a child, that kind of trust that I had for my own experiences started to get cut and severed bit by bit. I would be upset about an abusive episode with my main abuser in the house. I would go to one of my parental figures and share my feelings and my pain, and would get told that I'm overreacting and it's not. I shouldn't even, not even just overreacting. Overreacting was said, but it's also I shouldn't cry and all of these other things, right? So I was brought up in this environment where I was taught not to trust my own perceptions, which lead me to severely dissociate from my body. I was living my entire life dissociated, not being connected to my physical body, which means that I was not connected to my intuitive senses anymore. Because in order to perceive all of these subtleties, you need to be grounded and centered in your body. Otherwise, you can't pick that up. So, I cannot tell you exactly when that cut happened because, like I said, my memories of that time are fuzzy from trauma and everything else. But I can tell you very distinctly when it started to kick back in. And I was cut off, which also means that all of the decisions I made and everything was kind of hazy. Everything felt kind of hazy. I felt hazy. I didn't know who I was. I struggled with topics of self confidence. I struggled with topics of sexuality, gender identity. All of these things were muddled because I wasn't connected to my intuition. So I didn't know who I was. And then when I turned 21, was the first time in my life where it was an awakening. It was kind of a subtle kind of awakening where for the first time I woke up and looked around me and at my life. I looked at the kind of friends I had at the time. I looked at the romantic relationship I was in at the time, and just family relationships and everything else. And I looked up and I was like, something here is not right. And that was the starting point where I started to kick people out of my life. To be quite frank, I started with my friends. I looked at the way with which my friends were interacting with me, and things didn't sit right with me. And it was not a very, very good environment. There was some substance abuse involved, not from my side ever, but something happened with my friend because another friend came in, joined into the friend group, and brought some things to the friend group that were not good. I'm just going to say not good. Um, and I kind of stayed clear of that. And because of that, there was already a separation happening, if you catch my drift. I didn't meet up with them anymore when they were doing their things. And it was kind of a natural progression. And I started to kick each of them like out of my life. And I basically went through the list. I broke up with my boyfriend that I had at the time because he was it was I mean, I came from an abusive household, so naturally it was like another abusive relationship because that was all that I knew of at the time and what I thought I deserved at the time. And I broke it off there, and then I went through my family until I guess I got stuck up with my main abuser. And for like a solid year and a half, I would, oh, such a baby child. I'm sorry. It's like if anyone has ever dealt with people who have experiences with like narcissistic personality disorder, and I don't mean the cute kind of fluffy, they need to brush up their ego a bit. I mean like the real deal, the actual real deal. um, I spent about a year and a half speaking to them every single time after they hurt me to explain exactly how they hurt me and try and let them know that this is not okay for me. And I say like baby child from my perspective now because I was basically uh, giving them more more bullets for their gun, essentially, right? But I didn't know at the time. And the reason that I'm sharing that is because that period of my life started the process of reconnecting with my intuition, because I started to trust my perception. With every single person, things felt off. This felt off, that felt off. I don't like that. This doesn't sit right with me. It was coming from a place of I deserve better. And I trust that when something is off, and I started to trust it and I started to act on it, these two go hand in hand. And that was my moment of reconnecting with my intuition. And I say my moment, it was a moment, but it was a very long journey. And eventually, that main abuser, I also am no longer in contact with them. And all hell broke loose. If anyone ever tried to break out of just a fragment of their family system that was abusive and they were in a scapegoat position, you know where it's at. It's awful. It's horrible. But I stuck to what I knew about myself. And I started to get more of an outside perspective because I started to pull back from everybody, started to see all of the dynamics, and that allowed me to strengthen my intuition over time because I started to see when I was no longer engaged with that, I started to get the feedback that what I'm feeling is valid, what I'm feeling is right, what I'm picking up, the kind of energy that I'm picking up there, the kind of intentions and everything else I'm picking up is actually right. So that was a huge starting point for me to learn to trust my intuition. And that started to develop then further. So it was more coming more from a feeling sense before anything else. So I would say clairsentience came in first in that way, the feeling. Clear cognizance came a little bit later, where I would just randomly know some things, just like little tidbits here and there. To give you one example, sometimes when I enter into relationships, I already know how they play out when I enter into them. And it's a very subtle, quiet kind of knowing, like, oh my God, they're going to break my heart. And it's not coming with a lot of emotional intensity. It's very calm, quiet, matter of fact, almost, yeah, it's like, almost like a fact that I just know. And when there's no emotion connected to it in this way, and not a like huge emotional wave of like, oh my God, they're gonna break my heart, I know it's not coming from a place of fear, it's my intuition. And then I just let things play out the way that they need to play out. So I don't always take action on that when I get this kind of insight in the beginning. Um, and there was one significant relationship in the second half of my 20s. So I'm turning 33 in a week. Actually, probably by the time that this is out, I had my 33rd birthday.
Yay.
I know, I'm so excited for it. It's going to be a really good year. I can feel it. And I had a very significant relationship in the second half of my 20s. That was also emotional roller coaster. And in that period of time, I started to connect with tarot. So I want to bring tarot into this conversation because it was a very big turning point again for connecting with my intuition. Um, I would start to listen to relationship readings because I just couldn't figure out my own relationship. Which, if you're listening right now, and if you actually need to turn to a tarot reading because you can't talk to your partner about this problem, it's not a good sign. It was not a good sign, but that's where I started anyway. That's where I started. And a little bit later down the line, a couple of maybe a year later or something like this, I was still together with this person. At that time, I started to have another psychic dream. And sometimes my psychic dreams, sometimes I will see something happening to a person that's close to me. Or at least, I mean, I still do, but at that time, that was the main thing. And sometimes I will get symbols and messages through these dreams. So the way that I actually got called to buy a tarot deck was that I had a significant, I'm going to call them witchy dreams. I had a significant witchy dream where I saw the card of the Ace of Cups. And if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a huge chalice that's standing on top of water. And there is a bird flying into the top of the chalice, just like straight from the sky down to the chalice. And the chalice is overflowing with water. And I saw an image of the Ace of Cups, and it was animated in my dream. So the water was just pouring and pouring and pouring out of the cup, but not to empty it. It was just so abundant and filled and was just kept flowing and flowing. And that was the last thing that I saw before I woke up. And I woke up and got the very, very strong urge to buy myself a tarot deck. And I looked for quite a while to find a tarot deck that I liked because I read online everywhere that you should use the Rider Waite Tarot as a starting point to learn and to dive into it. And I liked the symbolism in general, but I didn't love the colors. And I'm
Mhm.
a visual bitch. Always have been, always will. And I didn't like it. So I bought myself one that is gold foil tarot. So it has like all of the regular imagery of the tarot deck, the Rider Waite Tarot, but it's basically just the outline in like gold foil. And I would connect with the tarot, and I would give readings to myself. And then I started to give readings to other friends. And I started to get the feedback that everything that I perceived, what I was picking up intuitively, was actually on point, and it was so on point that I picked up on things that my friends hadn't told me about, and that I had no knowledge either. Then my psychic dreams started to kick up again, and I would see friends in my dreams that I hadn't connected with in months for months at a time, and I would see that they're in some kind of emotional distress, physical pain. Sometimes I would get very concrete messages about what's going on in their lives, and I would test my intuition by then reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, are you okay?" and basically feeling the situation and getting confirmation that what I was dreaming and seeing in these visions when I was sleeping was actually happening and was legit. To give you one example as well, one of my friends had a minor routine surgery at the dentist's office that I didn't know about because, like, you don't really tell your friends that you got the regular stuff going on, right? And she didn't tell me about it. And I dreamed about her. And in my dream, she was like screaming and crying and was just in complete agony and pain. And when I woke up, I had the crazy, intense urge to reach out to her and check in and see if she's okay. And I reached out to her, and what turned out, like I said, I didn't know about it. She had that regular surgery, but for
Mm.
some reason, they gave her the wrong kind of medication. They didn't give her the right kind of pain medication, and that's why her pain was so intense.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I have like many stories from that earlier time when I started to pick that up and pick up these messages. And I will say that these psychic senses and everything started to come back online in 2019. 2020, when the pandemic hit, was a big point because that significant relationship in my second half of my 20s that I spoke about came to an end. And it brought me into this place of deep introspection where I was really confronted with my deepest core wounds and did lots of shadow work, basically wrapping up this entire 10-year cycle with a cute little bow. But
Mm.
everything else was coming up to the surface. And because I was by myself, I trusted my feelings much more. Everything else started to open up. So the clairvoyance started to kick in, and I started to see spirits again and have like entities visit me, and had some scary encounters as well because I didn't have good boundaries at that time, energetic boundaries and personal boundaries all around. Just in general, not no good boundaries.
We've all been there, I think.
Yeah, no, fun times, fun times. And yeah, I mean, the clairvoyance started to come back. Like I said, I started to see the spirits. A clairaudience started to come back, where I started to hear my spirit guides first.
Mhm.
That was in connection with the spirit encounters that were scary. I started to get feedback on what I needed to do. So basically, I started to learn how to shield myself and all of that stuff. Um, Claircognizance, like I said, was always kind of present, a little bit more quiet, but the volume of everything else was turned up. And I also had a few experiences with clear gustance. That's clear smelling, right?
Right.
Yeah, clear
Right.
smelling.
Yeah.
Um, I still do occasionally, but rarely. To give you maybe two examples, I would sometimes go into a room and I would be by myself in my own apartment, and I lived by myself. And I would smell a perfume in a particular area. And it was like there was a person standing there and I could smell their scent.
Mm.
Sometimes I could connect that to a person that had passed over as well. And sometimes I just didn't know. And sometimes I would watch a pick a card reading on YouTube actually. And I remember like very vividly, like one time where someone was shuffling their tarot deck, and was I had picked my pile and they were shuffling the tarot deck, looking to pull the next card, and I smelled seaweed. I just straight up smelled seaweed and the salty smell of the sea, and they turned it on around, and it was the Queen of Cups. And I was like, "Oh my god, that's new."
That's awesome.
But those experiences with the clairgustance. It's a very quiet kind of sense for me. It's not very developed. I think that's the main point. Trusting, learning to trust, testing it out. I talked
It's
for a
also
long
great that
time.
you would reach out to people and get confirmation of things that were coming to you.
I needed to.
Yeah. And I encourage anyone who's listening or watching, if it's appropriate, to reach out and see if they can get confirmation on things coming to them.
To be clear with you, I was in the spiritual closet. Okay, none of my friends knew that I was dealing with any of that stuff.
Mm.
And I didn't, when I reached out to them, I didn't say, "Hey, I had a vision in my dream." I mean, now I do because that's the kind of friends that I have now.
Right.
But at that time, I didn't. I didn't reach out to them and say, "Hey, I had a vision in my dream" or something. I basically just checked in and saw how they were doing, and maybe if it's someone where I knew they were a bit more open, I would say, "Hey, I saw something happening in my dream. Um, Sometimes I would tell the whole story, and they were like, "Oh my god, that happened last night while I was sleeping."
Yeah. It helps establish trust with yourself and know
Yeah.
that these things are real.
And I think developing that trust with my intuition first before everything else happened in my life and I encountered everything else is exactly why my senses were able to develop to that degree that they have and continue to develop because I have such a strong foundation in that self trust. I trust my perceptions. I know they're on point. I know I'm getting this right. And I see that as a huge stumbling block for a lot of people that I encounter um, in sessions with me and just in general, people reaching out to me. That's the biggest stumbling block is they don't trust their intuition. They second guess. They have a lot of doubt, and they don't even. A lot of the times, they don't even allow themselves to take that step of maybe trusting that intuition and just seeing what happens. Just that's, and it doesn't need to be a major decision of getting the intuition that you need to quit your job or something. It can be something a lot more lot smaller, a lot more subtle, like feeling like for some reason today I need to go to this one particular place in my city or in my area, and I don't know what I'm going to find there, but I feel like I should go there, and just going there and seeing what happens. Because the more you start trusting that intuition and following and taking some action based on that, the more it will start to guide you and the more it will pick up. It's like the use it or lose it, I guess, is a good phrase as well for that.
Absolutely. You did mention, and I want to emphasize this, that when we have this sudden urge to do something or a
Yeah.
nudge and we don't know where that comes from, or suddenly a thought pops into our head, or even information pops into our head, like something's wrong with mom,
Oh, yeah.
but it's clear and it's not emotional.
Yeah.
You might have an emotional reaction to whatever information pops into your head or idea, but the actual idea itself, it should be surrounded by clarity and calm. And
Yeah.
that's a really good indication that it's your intuition.
Yeah. I think the calm is the biggest indicator
Yep. Absolutely.
to
And very
distinguish.
often this thought of like, I don't know how I know that, or where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a human experience to have that. And I think a lot of people shut that down at a young age.
But it's never too late to reconnect with that.
Mm-mm. I love your story because it's a really beautiful reminder of that. We can always start again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, I have another question for you, my love.
Sure, hit me. I was
Okay.
spoke for so long. I didn't know before the episode started how deep I would go and how much I would share. Okay,
It's
hit me.
it's excellent. I love
Hit me.
hearing it all. Okay. My next question for you is, how does your intuition present itself? You talked, about different examples and mentioned some
Yeah,
things. Could you give us kind of an umbrella, like a big picture, how your intuition presents itself?
sure. So, you also said how does it change throughout my life, right? I
Yeah.
started
Yeah, you can
to
add that in there.
I
Absolutely.
started
How's it changed?
to speak about how it changed throughout my life a little bit already.
Mm.
Um, because the senses really did come back online one by one. The claircognizant was always there, kind of quiet and in the background. The next thing that hit me was the clairsentience, so feeling spirits. And when I say feeling spirits around, I do mean I physically feel them. It's a different kind of energetic feel in my room when they are right next to me. The energies feel different. And for example, if I'm like, I can locate it, even if I'm moving my hand, let's say they're right next to me. Even when I'm moving my hand, there are areas that feel warmer, there are areas that feel colder. And that's how I can distinguish. There's the regular room temperature, the regular feel of the room. And then if I move my hand 1 centimeter to the side, I'm in some kind of energy. Sometimes, again, they feel warm, sometimes they feel cold, some of them feel like it's difficult to describe, but almost like a prickling kind of energy, kind of static energy, but I can physically feel them. So that's how I can feel spirits in this particular way. And the way that that came back online was I would connect with my clairsentience in moments of emotional distress. So somewhere along that time when I started to break up with all of these people, kick all of them out, and started to um, empower myself and what I was feeling. I don't need to go into detail about the kind of emotional pain that was connected to
Mm.
that, the amount of grief
Yeah, that's
that was
huge.
present there. There were several years where, even if I look at images of myself at that time, I'm shocked because it looks like nobody's home. Like my eyes are completely dead. There was no one home. And in that period, I had a few experiences where the clairsentience was able to come through all of that fog.
Mm.
Um, and I felt it through physical touch. So there was one time where I don't even remember what happened, to be honest with you right now, but I was crying a lot and I was lying on my living room floor, like a little breakdown moment.
Mm.
I was in severe emotional pain and I was crying. And I had one hand over my eye and I was lying on my back and I had my knees were kind of up at an angle, just resting, my knees resting against each other. And I had the other hand out, like just basically outstretched from my shoulder, just lying on the floor, one hand over my eye, one out like this. And I felt someone touching my hand and just like gently, basically gently squeezing my hand, the palm of my hand. And it was very strong sensation, very distinct, a very distinct squeeze, just like someone would just gently take your hand and gently squeeze it. And that was so pronounced that it completely took me out of my moment of crying. And so super surprised, looking to my right side, looking at my hand. And I was living alone. I was the only person at home in my
Right,
apartment and
right.
looking to the side. And I expected to see someone there,
Mm.
but there was no one there.
Mm. Yep.
So that's how the clairsentience slowly started to creep back into my life, with like the touching. And these these when I say I can feel my guides touching me, a lot of people get kind of freaked out because they have this kind of horror movie scenario in their mind of something touching you and you can't see what's there, but it's
Right.
very, like, the energy that comes with it is very calm, very soothing, very warm, right? And I would have experiences like that. So that's how the clairsentience presents itself.
Mm.
Um, it also presents itself when I do tarot readings, for example, where I feel a specific kind of emotion when I'm looking at a card, or the spirit guides of my client bring a certain feeling through me, and I feel something in my body. Sometimes physically, sometimes I know there's a particular area that needs some attention from the client, and sometimes it's more of an emotional thing, I'm just describing a situation and how it feels. And again, it's like, yeah, it's a feeling that comes through, so it's channeled. I should just say I'm a channeler in general. And then the clairaudience came back. Am I sharing that story yet?
Yeah.
Really? That scary story?
Well, it's when your clairaudience
Yeah, that's true. All right, so
kicked
buckle
in.
up. We got a first scary spirit encounter here.
Ooh, let's go.
I guess it's good because it also connects with dream time. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
actually, it's also connected with my clairvoyance. In 2020, in 2020, all of my senses, all of the volume of all of my senses was like turned to max volume all of a sudden, 2020. And I started to see spirits wandering around in my apartment. And I started to see spirits in my entryway in terms of shadows, like shadow people. I saw a lot of shadow people around. I saw orbs floating around. I was living on the fourth floor. I saw orbs inside of my house. I saw huge orbs floating outside of the house, just floating by my balcony, in front of my balcony window. I saw other kinds of beings. I guess some of them could be described or would be described as fairies in terms of
Mm.
visual. Yeah, like all different kinds of spirits that I saw. And it was early days of my knowledge of that kind of part of that kind of side of spirituality. And one thing that I did all throughout my journey was that I didn't read about things beforehand. I would have my experiences, and then I would hop onto Google, let's say, and Google and see if other people had their own experience. And I needed to work in this way because I felt if I didn't do it this way, I would have not trusted my perception as much.
Mm.
So I allowed myself to have the experience, and then I looked and saw if other people had that. So in 2020, and that's important because, like I said, I was a baby. I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know about, about energetic protection and boundaries. I am not coming from a spiritual or religious family at all. That was never part of my life. So I was just brand new into all of that stuff. And I would get visitations from different kinds of entities in my dreams as well. I remember it was not at night, it was just the middle of the day. And I felt, through my clairsentience, felt an energy in my apartment. And I kind of felt like it had something to tell me. So what did I do? I said, "Oh, you're here. Let me just have a little nap and see what comes up." I'm laughing now because I was completely energetically opening myself up to something that I had no idea who or what it was. It was not a great idea, but it happened. And I had in in my nap, it's funny because I do spirit releasement now and entity releasement, so I know so much more. And looking back at this, I just want to give myself 20 different face palms. But when I was sleeping, I saw a vision of an American soldier. And actually, I don't think we mentioned it, but we are both located in Germany right now. Yeah. So, there's a lot of history when it comes to war around here. World War One, World War Two. And there was an American soldier, and I saw a fragment of his story and what happened. And it was in Germany. So basically, I saw a fragment of his life, and I saw the kind of pain that happened. There was a betrayal happening with one of his brothers who was also in the army, and they were in they were at war at that present time. You know what I saw in that vision? They were out on the front. Yeah. And when I woke up, I was like, "Oh, interesting." And my stomach, like around my no, sorry, my sacral, around my belly button, the energy felt kind of like it was almost bubbling. Like what's the imagery that I can give you to describe that? It's like if you have sparkling water and you see all of the little bubbles coming up. I had that kind of sensation around my belly button of everything was kind of bubbling, and I didn't know what to make of that. But I didn't think anything else of it. um, Over the next 3 days, my feelings of anxiety started to rank up in a way that I have never experienced before. And I had experiences with feeling anxious feelings, right? Because I went through that traumatic period in my life and I unraveled that, and I was like a mess. So I knew about it, but usually I could pinpoint where it came from. But that time I couldn't pinpoint it. And it just started to rank up in intensity and intensity, intensity. It's almost like someone was cranking it up. And I started to not be able to sleep the night through. Like my breathing would started to get constricted. I didn't have any more visions about that soldier, by the way, just so you know, no more visions were happening, um, which is also why I didn't connect that. I
Mm.
remember one time I opened one of my books from one of my oracle decks, and I saw a message that said sage, and I was visually drawn to the sage part, but then I dismissed it. I saw it, I clocked it, and then I was like, "That's not for me." And so after that three days, I
It's not
was
putting the puzzle pieces together.
not at all. Didn't click. Nothing clicked. I even like I said, I looked directly at the message and I just ignored it. And I um, went to sleep that night after the third day, and I couldn't fall asleep, but I did eventually fall asleep. Just the anxiety, the anxiety and panic, just like yeah, ramped up. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and that's where the clairaudience comes in, because I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard a male voice say very loudly and very distinctly in my left ear, "Get up and sage." It was a direct order like this, "Get up and sage." And I looked at the time and it was 1:30 a.m. I didn't question the voice. The anxiety that I felt was amped up to was even more present. I didn't question the voice. I just knew I needed to get up and sage now, and I needed to be done before 3 a.m. To this day, I still don't fully know what would have happened if I would not have done that. But I got up and I started. I put up some music for cleansing. I found some tune on YouTube. Never done a cleanse like this before as well, so that was my first time cleansing as well. Making it count.
I feel like everyone's first cleanse, I'll call it a panic cleanse, where
Yeah,
you're
it was a
like,
panic
"What
cleanse.
am I doing? I've gotta get this done. Oh my gosh."
Yeah,
Who is I mean, for you, it's the middle of the night, but I'm sure a lot
yeah,
of people, if it's during the day, it's like you check in with anyone who might be even witchy-ish,
yeah.
Googling,
I
right?
googled. I
Yeah.
googled, all right? I
Okay.
googled how many times I had to walk across around the room and like getting the corner, getting the cabinets and everything
Right.
else. And
Right.
I had
Oh god.
some sage from my mother's garden that was dried that I always have, and I basically just bundled that up, and I used that kind of sage. And
It's
now they're
perfect.
really, if you think the story was creepy before, like
Just wait.
it's getting so much more worse now.
Here it comes.
That was really
Oh
scary,
gosh.
like, I'm not gonna lie, that was really scary. Was not the scariest encounters that I've had since then, but it's up there. So, I stood in my apartment. I had a bathroom, I had a bedroom, a little entryway, and then I had a combined living room and kitchen, just like one huge room. And I was standing at my kitchen counter, wrapping up my sage. My music was turned on. It was in the middle of my living room, and I decided to go through through my entire apartment 3 times, basically just the entire parameter of my apartment 3 times, and then I would do each room individually as well. And I stood there, and I wanted to burn the sage. I had the lighter in my hand, and I wanted to burn the sage, and behind me, an energy manifested itself, and my clairsentience picked it up. And it was a physical, or I should say, an energetic body that felt very real, of a human that was much heavier and much taller than me, 1 centimeter standing right behind me. That was so incredibly angry at me, and
Mm.
so much anger and hatred coming from that energy that clearly tried to scare the fuck out of me right behind me. And I knew it was, at that moment, I knew it was that kind of soldier that I saw. I knew that he somehow got attached to me. I knew he was there. I knew that was him. In that moment, I recognized and I was like, "Oh my fucking God." And my voice got shaky, and I lit my sage, and I walked around the room, and I started to say some things about him not being welcome, him needing to leave, and I was panicked.
Yeah.
I was panicked. I was in so much fear, but I kept going because I also recognized that him getting angry at me for doing this means that whatever I'm doing is going to work. Otherwise, he wouldn't be angry. He would not do anything. So I needed to keep going. So my voice was shaking, and I kept going, and I started to speak. And I started to speak to him. I started to speak to him to go towards the light. And then the claircognizance kicked in, and I realized that I am actually a medium because I started to get more information about him. And I started to talk about his family, and I started to speak about the names of his siblings and who would be waiting at the other side. Particular, I still remember her name was Beth. That was his sister. And Beth was going to come and pick him up. So I was walking doing my first cleanse, crying. I was crying. Just the sheer panic brought the tears, tears were streaming. I was just panicked, and I just walked around and just spoke whatever came through
Mm.
to me.
Mm.
And I said, Beth is here to come pick you up, and one of my guides is going to bring you. And I did the second round, and then everything immediately started to die down. So I had one round left to do, and I did that round, and I knew everything was gone. But that was my first moment of hearing the clear audience, realizing that I'm a medium and I can channel information through. Was simultaneously the first releasement session that I did, even though I
Mm.
didn't recognize it as such at that time.
Right.
Um, and that was a ride. After that, I learned psychic protection. I have more stories to share about psychic protection and how I knew it was working, but I want to save that for our protection episode.
Yeah, we'll do a whole episode dedicated to that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe to tie that up with a bow, you said, how has that changed throughout my life? It is all of this is very present. I have very strong energetic boundaries. So even if I
Mhm.
pick things up, and I always do, I do clearings professionally now, both for spaces, but also clearings for people. I guess I didn't say it outright, but what I experienced in that moment was an energy attachment. It was an earthbound spirit, so someone who had died and had not crossed over to the other side. It attached itself to me and my body. And that was what I was clearing that day. I'm doing that stuff professionally now. I don't I no longer need to use sage. I work with Reiki now. It's a very different way of working. I feel like I'm jumping to the end point here, but we're so far into the episode as well, and I know that we will circle back to these points
Yeah,
in the next couple of months anyway.
absolutely.
But the way that I perceive that now when I'm giving Reiki sessions, like I can see where in the energy body of my client something is attached. I can tell what it was. I can get the whole backstory. I'm able to completely pull it out by the roots. I'm able to cleanse and clear it, give this one healing as well so that it's peaceful and can return to a state of balance. I can cross that over, and but that was really my first experience of it. And then there were many years where it was more quiet on the front of spirit releasements. And then in the beginning of 2024, it started to ramp up again. It started to come back. What had changed was I was no longer scared. There was no fear present anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm going to leave that part of the story for another day.
Yeah, that's a great story to describe how our intuition works in all of the elements
Yeah.
working together.
I should say, after
Beautiful.
that initial get up and stage, which I knew was my guide,
Yeah.
I started to hear them all the time, just doing random things. And it's still like this. I would just walk and walk my dog, and I will just hear something like coming at me from like the right side of my ear, of my head. And different guides have different voices inside of my head.
Mm,
And when I'm really honing in on like where they're coming from, basically these voices, they have different positions as well. So there are guides that they have a set voice, and they have a set position from which they talk to me, if that makes sense. Some even sound echoey. I have some angelic beings that have a very like echoey kind of voice, very ethereal kind of voice.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, and your clairvoyance as well.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the clairvoyance that much, did I?
You didn't? No.
I didn't. What can I share about the clairvoyance?
Could you share maybe the evolution of your clairvoyance? Because where it is
Oh
right now
yeah.
is just it's
Oh yeah.
incredible. It's
Yeah.
an honor to be at your side and hear about this.
So for you listening or watching, Megan gets all of my voice messages, okay? She gets all of my voice messages
I
with
love it.
the stories and the dreams, and it's unhinged. I can't even I can't even pretend that it's not. It's unhinged.
Mm,
And I'm
it's out of
incredibly
this world.
grateful that I have a friend like that where I can actually share it, because for the longest part of my life I didn't have anyone to share that stuff with. Okay. But I'm going to circle back. I just needed to have my moment. My moment of appreciation.
Thank
But
you.
I'm going to circle back to the story now, I promise. So my clairvoyance, I mean, it presented itself through the dreams, right? I spoke about that, the dreams. And then it started to come through when I did tarot readings for myself and also for others, but primarily first for myself, where I would see short snippets and visuals of just a scene.
Mm,
And it was getting a point across for this reading. So when I do readings in general, I actually never learned I never learned the regular meanings for any of the tarot cards. I never did. I always wanted to get into it. I always wanted to, properly study them and learn them, but I never did. And I feel like a little bit guilty for that still. I still feel a little bit guilty about that. I feel like I should learn that. But here's the thing. When I do readings, it doesn't matter what any of the descriptors are of any of these things, because I will visually see a scene and I can describe it and I will know what it's about. So that was how the clairvoyance started to then grow. Then I started to have dream visions that were connected to my own healing. Most notably, I have dream visions about past lives, where I will wake up and it's always the last thing that I see before I wake up, where I will wake up and I will know that that was just a past life. That's the claircognizance kicking back in. And then I had another huge blow up of my clairvoyance a couple of months ago. I'm not sure on the time frame, to be honest, right now. I don't know. But it was a couple of months ago, because in the beginning of the year, the spirit action, I spoke about that. The spirit action in my life started to ramp itself up to a degree that I have never experienced before. And my work started to shift big time. So I did a lot of past life work in 2023. And actually, I need to go back to that, yeah, to 2023. And I had one hypnosis session where I connected, so not a dream vision, hypnosis session, where I connected with a past life of mine where I was an alien on Earth. If you are curious about that, I'm going to link a video down below for you where I actually share that story, because I have talked about that experience on my channel and I share. So if you want to watch that or listen to that, I'm going to leave it there for you as a resource. And the bottom line was, it was a lifetime where I was severely clairvoyant, and I saw the outcomes of everything. And I was in a situation of war, and I knew the outcome was not favorable for us, and I had to send everyone into battle regardless, and knowing everyone would die. And that kind of pain from that lifetime caused me to shut down my clairvoyance and say, if that kind of gift, if that kind of knowledge and power doesn't matter at the end of the day, where it
Mm,
comes with the kind of pain that I needed to endure with like the full
mm,
knowledge, then I want no part of it.
mm,
So I
mhm,
shut that down.
mhm,
And in the beginning of this year, 2024, when the spirits started to come and show up, and I was already I have connected with Reiki a couple of years ago, so I was already a Reiki practitioner in the beginning of the year, and I started to learn how to use Reiki for helping spirits cross over. At first, it was spirits that were around me, earthbounds, extraterrestrial spirits, all other different kinds of energies and entities present, which then moved into me having dream visions of past lives, waking up and knowing that I had an energy attachment from that past life. And so I learned how to use Reiki to clear out these kind of entities that were attached to me. And I found one energetic wound. It was not an entity, it was a specific energetic kind of wound that I had given myself from that lifetime when I was super clairvoyant and I didn't want to be clairvoyant anymore. I didn't want to deal with the pain anymore. And I found that wound, energetic wound in my body, and I healed that completely. My clairvoyance started to open up again a
mm,
little bit. And then as my releasement work started to continue and to grow and develop, I had one session, it was the first time where an entity tried to mask itself. So basically, what I'm doing when I do these sessions is I can scan for disruptions in the energy system. You know, the energy system itself is whole, whether it's your energy system of your physical body, the energy system of your aura, the energy system of your emotional body, the energy system of your spiritual body. That's itself a whole unit. The same goes for a house. A house also has an energetic environment, it's a unit. And when something there is disruptive and is not supposed to be there naturally, it's not part of that unit, I'm able to pick up on that. I'm able to sense that. And sometimes these kinds of entities try to mask themselves by presenting themselves in a way that they are not. Um, to make it a bit more concrete for you, the example. What I saw when I scanned my own energy body or my own physical body in my third eye, I saw something that looked like a cute, small golden octopus, where the top part of the octopus head was on top of my third eye. And then the tentacles, they were not scary at all, by the way. It was really, really cute, really, really sweet looking. The tentacles were kind of very gently, almost like a jellyfish that's like gracefully moving through the water. The tentacles were like really, really gracefully and gently and calmly moving through my third eye, just the center of my third eye. And it was golden and it confused me because up until that point, the kind of entities, the way that I see them, yo, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's clear that they're not supposed to be there. It's nasty sometimes. I mean, Megan is nodding because they know they have their own experiences. That there's a lot going on, and I got the message that when I scan whatever I see, I need to pull out. And I pulled it out. I started the first layer of cleansing, and then I saw what was underneath this golden layer, and it was
mhm,
an entity. It was an entity that was primarily working on blocking my clairvoyance. That was the reason that it was there, was to block the clairvoyance. And after I cleansed that, healed that, crossed that one over, and gave myself and that area more healing, immediately the day after, my clairvoyance was blown wide open in a way that I never experienced before. I'm still in shock that it was a day by day thing, like a complete shift from one day to the next. Because the things that I describe and the way that I visually see now, in the beginning, I was more clairsentient of something being there rather than seeing. And the way that I perceive now when I'm scanning, it's wild, the difference. I mean, Megan, you were there for that journey. Like
Right.
you know how it changed for me and
Right.
how my sight changed probably better than I do because you were on the outside and I was just caught up in it.
And I'm experiencing something similar. My clairvoyance is not anywhere comparable to yours, but it's improving and opening up.
Yeah.
So I understand when you're saying what this is like. I think for anyone listening, the point is we I've heard a lot of people speak about their psychic abilities as though they've always existed and will continue to exist that way. But
Yeah.
it's okay if that's not your experience. It's okay to quote unquote lose a clair or gain a clair or, you know, for something to be really powerful for some time and then diminish.
Yeah.
Our experience is that that's quite normal.
Yeah.
And yeah, that these work in conjunction with each other to deliver whatever it is whatever work we're doing with that. And Linda and I will talk about that at length when we get more into releasements and things like that, because
Yeah.
she and I do this very differently, but the outcome is the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say that the clairvoyance, like it was not before this releasement session, it was not. I was not leading with clairvoyance. I was leading with the clear sentience more and the clairaudience, but the clairvoyance has trumped the clairsentience now. Like clairsentience right now for me is a bit more quiet.
Mm.
It's in part also because of my environment that I'm in right now. That is like, it's a bit more. I'm in a transition period right now, and it's a bit more quiet right now, so that I don't perceive too much of what's going on energetically, so that I don't get overwhelmed. But I know that when I'm ready and I'm coming out of this transition period, I know that it will be, the volume will get turned up again, and it's temporary for my protection, and I don't just it is what it is. But if I want to tune into it, it's always there.
Yeah. I think for anyone who's interested in turning up the volume or even introducing a clair that they're really interested in experiencing. You know, there are some people who are not at all clairvoyant. And of course, that's the big one in the psychic world. A lot of people talk about that. A lot of people think that if you're not clairvoyant, then you're not really powerfully psychic. So, for example, anyone who's interested in tapping into clairvoyance, um, I think what's very interesting is Linda and I both have come to the realization in our work with other lives, like my other lives that are coming to me, it's very clear that we make choices, often subconsciously, to turn these things off or to block them. It
Yeah.
could be from our current life. A lot of people, and Linda, you shared experiences of your own trauma. And again, I want to reiterate something you said. I don't use the word trauma lightly. We're talking about something that really is,
Mm.
a traumatic experience, and very real trauma can shut these things down. And it can be from this life, but it can be from another life.
I
And
think for me it was a combination. Of everything. I have another past life memory that I haven't shared yet, which goes back to being a human or like a woman at the time of the witch hunt. And I also worked as as a healer in that lifetime, and naturally it didn't end well. But that contributed to a fear of being seen. So a lot of the times when it comes to my intuition or all of the clairs, I would say where I'm at now and looking back at the last year or so, the things that I have been running up against were all rooted in some kind of past life experiences. And I needed to heal and unravel the past life experience in order to fully reconnect with that kind of side of my gifts, I guess.
Yeah, you have a powerful story of your intuition. There was a question I had that you didn't answer, and I didn't ask it, but I would like to ask you.
Ask me.
Do you have a strong yes or strong no intuition? In moments where you need to say yes or no to something or someone, or to make a decision that's a yes or no decision, do you have a
I
strong yes or a strong no intuition?
I do. I do. It presents itself in slightly different ways depending on the situation. When I think about it, it's is the person, let's say, a person asks me something like, are they standing right next to me? Are they looking at me, waiting for an answer? You
Mm,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Then it's a clear cognizant. I just know, yes or no. Um, and if it's something bigger, let's say something more complicated that involves a life change, major life change, very common, right? Thinking about
Yeah.
quitting a job or changing where you live, moving, relationship, whatever it may be. It's much more subtle. I work actually more with my clairsentience when that's the case. I tune into myself. In general, when there's not someone standing right next to me, just, in the moment waiting for an answer and I have a bit more time, I like to sit down often in a meditation posture because that's kind of comfortable for me. I will try to clear my mind and I will ask myself the question of how does it feel when I think about doing this thing? And then it feels good or it doesn't feel good. How does it feel when I'm not doing that thing? And how does my body respond? And it's very visceral feedback that I'm getting on whether or not something is good.
Mm,
And it has allowed me in my life on multiple occasions to make the right decisions for me, to tune into the wisdom of my body. Because my mind will tell me that logically speaking, I should stay in situations, but my body is giving me all of the signals that it's time to leave, it's time to go, or it's time to make some kind of change. And I've learned to really trust that. I'm not going to say that I'm always on point with like fully following through, but every single time that I haven't, it was not a good outcome. Like, I still needed to make the change, but the circumstances surrounding needing to make that change were always very painful, and I could have avoided that if I would have moved
mm.
earlier. Every single time. So I'm hoping I've learned my lesson by now. Crossing my fingers.
Being human is hard. It's
Yeah, it
it's
is.
hard when you really cultivate a strong trust with yourself and your intuition. It's hard when you're being shown that it's time to do something that you
Yeah,
don't want to do or that you're afraid of. That's so human. I think that might be the fundamental thing about being human. Are we gonna do the thing when we know that it's the thing to do,
yeah.
but we don't want to?
I will say one thing has changed for me when it comes to this over the last few years. I think the last 3 years, particularly. Because I'm very centered and grounded in myself now, I'm very connected to my senses. When a situation is no longer right, I immediately know it. And to describe the sensation to you, it's like someone from one second to the next pulled an energetic plug out of a situation.
Hmm.
And I know the moment that it's plugged. And I know then it's time to go. It's time to change. It's time to move. And while that is a beautiful gift to have or a beautiful confirmation to have, it is actually quite challenging when it comes to other people because when I'm actually moving the second that or not the second, maybe the day after, maybe the day after I notice that that energetic plug is pulled, to a lot of people who don't have that same experience, it almost looks like I'm leaving prematurely. You know,
Yep.
they don't fully understand why
Yep.
and think that maybe something can be salvaged or uh, that I'm moving impulsively, even.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just it's not. I'm not moving from that place. I'm not someone to leave quickly if there is any chance to make things work. Like that's not me. But that is, I think, the biggest point where I can feel and experience some kind of tension around that because it's also difficult to communicate. I
I
mean,
can only nod. I This
doing
really
the kind of
resonates.
yeah, like doing the kind of work that I'm doing now when I tell people exactly like that, just the plug got pulled, people get it, but it's still a smaller fraction of people.
And I would add to that, anyone who is raised as a girl or is perceived as a girl or a woman, I think men have it really, really difficult too, but there's a lot of suppression of the female, not
Yeah,
just people, but there's a suppression of the female. And when we're talking about intuition, when we're talking about the divine feminine that is the intuition, and there is a suppression of that in our society. And that's very important. That might be step one for anyone who wants to connect with their intuition, to acknowledge the fact that if you're in the Western world, then you're living in a suppression of the feminine and of the intuition.
yeah.
In many ways, for a lot of us, that can be the original disconnect, so to speak.
I mean, I know for myself, I had to unlearn a lot of things about femininity in general and find my role in it as well. And uh, I mean, I consider myself non binary and find my place in all of this and understanding all of this. And that definitely allowed me to tap deeper into my intuition because I no longer had that kind of warped image of what it was or what it means and
Mhm.
warped image of that energy and no longer had that idea of what I needed to be for others. I think overall intuition, the more the more hmm. Wait a second, I got it. I wanted to bring you like a bumper sticker, you know what I mean?
Yes.
the
You're almost there.
closer the closer I'll get there eventually. The closer you come to yourself and the more home you come to yourself, the more authentic you become in yourself, the easier it will be for you to be in tune and in touch with your intuition. Because the whole journey
Yes.
that I shared in this episode today is connected to me becoming myself and reconnecting with myself. These two
Yes.
are so interlinked.
Yes.
And I didn't even talk about anything concerning like gender or sexuality and unlearning and the conditioning because these are connected, like you
Absolutely.
said.
Absolutely. The more authentic we are with ourselves, the more connected we are to our intuition.
Yeah,
That was beautiful.
thank you. Worth the wait for my bumper sticker.
Always.
Oh, I thought I had it the first time around.
I'm not patient, but for you, I'm
Thank
patient.
you. I appreciate that.
I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
My pleasure. It really needed to come out. It needed to come out for a while now. I could feel it bubbling underneath the surface, but I didn't find the right outlet yet. And, I think this podcast is just it.
Yeah, I feel that.
So thank you for listening, not just you, Megan, but everyone else who's listening and watching. I hope maybe you could find yourself in some of the empowering parts of this story.
Mm.
Maybe you are down in the trenches right now.
Mm.
If you are, I'm sending you a big fat hug. It can get better. Keep going.
That's right.
Allow yourself to cry if you need to, of course, you know?
Yeah,
But you got this.
that's right. It gets better.
I think that's it from us today, hey?
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. So, have a beautiful, lovely rest of your day. And next week's episode is going to be the deep dive into Megan's intuition. And really get ready for that one because it's a good one as well.
I'm excited to share.
Yeah. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.